In a New Hampshire apartment, a single gunshot changed everything. And 9 hours later, a father was surrounded in an Applebee's parking lot with his 2 little girls still in the car. What happened between those 2 moments would expose the truth behind a relationship, a road trip, and a story no one saw coming. Subscribe to see how it all falls apart. 5 police units surround a white Subaru in an Applebee's parking lot. A man raises his hands. Inside the back seat, 2 young daughters, 4 and 1, unharmed. 9 hours earlier, their mother had been shot once in the head, inside an apartment nearly 200 miles north. No one heard it happen. To understand how a father ends up here, hands raised, children safe behind him, we have to go back 5 years. To a bar in Minnesota, a Super Bowl broadcast, and a relationship that looked, from the outside, like an ordinary beginning. Caitlyn Naffziger and Dustin Duren met in February 2019. By April, she was pregnant. Duren was a decorated Marine, a firearms instructor, honorably discharged with PTSD and depression. Online, he ran a YouTube gaming channel for 7 years, introducing Caitlyn to subscribers simply as Mom. The picture looked stable. It wasn't. By the time their second daughter turned 6 months old, the couple had already separated, though neither could afford to move out. What kept them under one roof wasn't love. It was money, custody, and a dispute that was about to follow them across the country. In January 2024, a new plan formed. Dustin would move to Berlin, New Hampshire first, with their older daughter, to prepare a home. Caitlyn would follow once seasonal work began. Before she arrived, Dustin called local police to ask what he could legally do if she tried to leave with the children. He was told, nothing, unless a law was broken. That call was logged. Weeks later, at a roadside handoff meant to send Caitlyn back to her aunt's, she changed her mind and got into Dustin's car instead, with both daughters, headed for an apartment she'd never wanted to enter. The apartment had been prepared for 1 adult and 1 child. Caitlyn slept on an air mattress. She had no car, no keys, and no way to leave Berlin on her own. For a day, nothing outwardly changed, but behind the scenes, 2 plans were forming that neither person knew about. Caitlyn and her aunt had arranged a code word. If things turned dangerous, a single text would send help. Dustin, meanwhile, had already begun believing Caitlyn intended to accuse him of something he hadn't done. Neither side knew what the other was quietly preparing for. By the evening of February 29th, Caitlyn wouldn't say when she planned to leave. Dustin decided he'd drive her back himself. He placed their younger daughter into a car seat in the hallway and began gathering belongings. The final confrontation happened over their older daughter, seated on her mother's lap on the couch. Dustin demanded Caitlyn hand her over. At 9 p.m., a single gunshot was fired inside that apartment. No neighbor reported hearing it. What happened in the minutes after that shot would determine everything that followed, starting with how far and how fast Dustin was willing to run. Within minutes, Dustin powered off his phone, cutting himself from cell tracking for nearly 12 hours. What he packed suggested planning. Spare clothing, food, water, blankets, and a full desktop computer tower, the same machine behind his YouTube channel. New Hampshire issued an Amber Alert the next morning. At 11 a.m., a mother and daughter driving through Keene spotted a matching car and stayed on the phone with dispatch, tracking its every turn, until it pulled into an Applebee's parking lot, where 5 police units were already closing in. Inside the car's door pocket, officers found a loaded Beretta pistol, a gift from Dustin's father, a retired sheriff's deputy. Ballistics would soon confirm it was the same weapon fired inside the Main Street apartment. During interrogation, Dustin explained himself through a Marine Corps color-coded threat system: white, calm, red, immediate action. He said the moment his daughter was pulled from his grip, his mind shifted to red, and he no longer saw an argument, but a hostage situation. One detail, though, would come back to complicate everything he claimed to know for certain. Dustin admitted he heard his daughter scream just before he fired, but couldn't say whether it was from her mother pulling her or from seeing the gun in his hand. That single uncertainty became the crack in his entire defense. At trial in October 2025, he testified that his military training had taken over, that he believed Caitlyn was planning to disappear with their children. The prosecution's answer came from one witness who knew the truth behind the code word Dustin's defense called a kidnapping plot. Caitlyn's aunt, Brenda. Brenda testified that the code word was never about escape. It was a safety plan, because Caitlyn was afraid of Dustin's control over her phone and his temper. She had no car, no ticket, and no way to vanish with a 4-year-old in a city she barely knew. After deliberating just 2.5 hours, the jury found Dustin Duren guilty of second-degree murder, reckless conduct with a deadly weapon, and endangering a child. At sentencing, the judge rejected his PTSD defense outright and handed down a number few in that courtroom expected: 45 years to life. That was the sentence a Coos County judge gave Dustin Duren in December 2025, along with over $12,000 in restitution. Caitlyn Naffziger's family watched 6 days of testimony to understand what happened to her in an apartment she'd lived in for barely 2 days. Elowyn and Violen were placed safely into state custody. Duren's YouTube channel, 7 years of gaming streams where he called Caitlyn Mom, remains online, untouched, a public record of a life that looked nothing like what happened behind that closed door.